I think till Ashwin comes, I think we get started.
Sure.
So the spirit of Ashwin Mahesh is roaming around somewhere here. And can somebody get him from outside, I think he says. In the interest of time, I think we'll just get started. So I think this topic is about accelerating IoT development in cities. And Chetan, if we could go with you, because you have a lot of experience trying to get some of these things going in cities across India and with the government. So what do you think are the key challenges in getting this accelerating IoT going in the public space?
Well, I think that a lot's been talked about on every aspect here. And what I wanted to do was, as we look at accelerating, I think the key part is it almost seems like we're in a car in dirt, and we're accelerating, and we're making a lot of noise, and the engine accelerating, but our wheels are just spinning. So I think the first fundamental thing is we need a platform that has a lot of hygiene in it. Without that, I don't think we can accelerate anything. And I think that's not just a platform from a perspective of, when I say hygiene, it's also from an infrastructure point of view, but it's also from people's mindsets and attitude. So I think this is going to be very important as we think of this area. The second part would be looked at is how do we think of things a little bit more holistically, while there are a lot of solutions happening here. So for example, can we really think of areas where we can create an Android for cities? And a lot of people have talked about that, but in a way where local communities can actually add value to this area and make a big difference. And what I feel today is a lot of the solutions are not distributed enough. Neither do they have an ecosystem to get it. We talk of traffic as being a big challenge right here. Can the Olas and the Ubers and the Googles put in data and bus drivers come in where a set of 10 guys can create a new app that can really look at differentiating on transport or a service or anything else. And I think what's going to be important if we can really create this open platform that's already existing in some places, but in a much larger manner, it's going to enable an acceleration of entrepreneurs and groups of people who can add on. Today, there is no way they can get data, and neither can they contribute on a platform. So I think it's key that cities create a platform which is very global in perspective and very open and is dynamic. And so it will change when it's today to five years from today, because the society is going to change. And the requirements are so unique for each area that you need local solutions of a framework that can be very open. So I think that would be the second part of it. The other thing to me would be looking at quick local solutions that can make meaningful impact that can then scale across the country. What I've been reading in the newspapers, any of you all from Whitefield or commute in Whitefield here? Yeah, I really...
must thank them.
I'm with you guys. It's really hard. It's really challenging on this front. And so I'm there with you. But if I just think about it, I said, you got the smartest guys there. You got the best companies in that part of the city. If you told 20,000 commuters that they could probably save 30% of their time, and we can reduce pollution by 20% on this area, would they sign up for it? And what if you knew how 20,000 people worked and moved and operated and come up with their own solutions? So do we need government? Yeah, let them fix the roads and the potholes and stuff, so let the hygiene part come. But can we create very simple, quick solutions where in 3 to 6 months, there can be a meaningful deployment, there can be there can be a change to people's lives, and then 50 places around the country start looking at this and deploy them, and they keep adding on. So I think for us to accelerate, it's important to give results, to showcase that also doesn't need 5 years of everything coming together before an impact happens. Can we think of some low-hanging fruits using technology and make this happen? The last part is a lot of initiatives are happening. What if we connect these initiatives together? So let me give one example. India's talked about 100 gigawatts of power, solar power, by 2022. Great move. I think that's it's going to really help us a lot. India's also launched 6 months ago a policy that says by 2020 we want 5 million electric vehicles. That's great. what if you actually connect the dots to all of this with the smart city, which hasn't been done? And there's tons of initiatives like this. So just to give you an idea, right? 5 million electric vehicles would need approximately 3% of that solar energy that's generated and can power 5 million vehicles. That's great. But what if they were all connected? Well, each vehicle can probably give you 2 to 5 kilowatts of power out, which means you can get 10 to 25 gigawatts of power. Imagine me stabilizing the entire grid on this. All I need is communication devices, which most of them would have, and I have grid connectivity on this front. Would I need new transformers? Would I need new other areas of building up capacity? Would I need my time of day look at metering systems to enable this to happen? So the connectivity of different initiatives will start to give us a very different level of change in the country. And I'm just giving one or two examples. There's tons of them. And I think these are going to be areas that can really help us accelerate. So looking at things at a very large holistic level, looking at local things, and I would say connecting the dots.
Sorry, thanks, Chetan, and hi. Two things come to mind in response to what you said. Hi, Jose, as well. One is that while we imagine these platforms, many of the large companies with the capacity to build these platforms or be part of their platforms are also trying to create these platforms in proprietary ways. I mean, they're trying to build their own businesses around that, and I don't want to blame them for that. I'm sort of skeptical how many of them would actually partner in a platform-level initiative in which there is openness not only for the city's benefit, but there's open competition in which they end up enabling the competition as much as being part of it. That is something for us to think about. There's one bottleneck over there. The second thing is that you talked about cities needing to create these platforms. I can imagine a Bangalore doing it. I can imagine maybe 5 cities around the world doing this. I can't imagine that even the Hubli Dharwads of the world or the second cities of each state in this country can actually put together the platform environment. So I think, if you look at it, the opportunity as I see it is to say, let us all create the platform environment. Whoever wants to participate is participating. Let us even make that platform environment hosted and available to cities directly. If there are competing environments, let those environments be, but we'll still make these environments available. And the proof of the pudding of what you're saying is whether you can get your company and I can get my company and he can get his company to partner in that ecosystem. And if that starts to happen, then the platform value will actually materialize. Until then, it will not. And so I'm sort of going to put the ball back in your court for a second here and say, well, you're now with a large conglomerate group that has many of these companies that can potentially partner in such a platform. And what do you think Mahindra would be willing to do to be part of enabling that platform?
I think none of the other people have spoken, so I feel bad about that. Well, I think I agree with you that, I also talked about having an Android approach. So I talked about open architecture. I talked about being common. And I think if standard interfaces were created that enabled a lot of companies to come in, a solar energy company, a parking metering company, a traffic management company, or garbage services company, and could plug and play it, I think that would work. And I think, like any other group, Mahindra Group, anyone else that's getting into it would be very interested, because what we're looking at is finally creating a solution that's quicker to market at lower cost. And I think at this stage, open architecture platforms will give you that tremendous advantage to do that.
Ishwar, I'm going to ask you the same question, really, right? We've talked about this previously, too, that it's easy to take the platform before the public and the consuming markets much faster than we can take the vendors and their ecosystems over there. But you've painstakingly built an ecosystem of capabilities around your own strengths and your vendors' strengths. How straightforward is it for you as Cisco to say, well, the world is different, which means we need a different way of looking at it, and if our vendors are not part of that, so be it.
I don't know if this is working. Okay, great. Yeah, I think there's definitely a need for having a common platform, but one of the challenges that we see is that the problem is very, very complex in terms of the different moving pieces. If you just take outdoor lighting as a subsystem of smart cities, that itself has different outdoor lighting systems, and a consortium like TALC has come up, which is now trying to at least define a common interface between a central management system and different outdoor lighting systems. So firstly, you need to have standardization and platforms among the subsystems, and then we can talk about aggregating them as well. You go one level down into the infrastructure part, which is where kind of Cisco started from. You have different low-power WAN technologies. You just had Joy talk about, listed 10 different technologies. So even at a basic connectivity layer, we are dealing with different protocols. So I think first thing is, I think the problem is just immensely complex in terms of standardizing or coming up with a common platform. So I think the approach that will work is, it will start with a vendor-based approach, which is what is happening right now. There will be some consolidation wherever possible, and will gradually emerge to it. But I don't see any easy way to get to that path immediately. Because on the other hand, there are other dynamics of the fact that every smart city deployment that we see has its unique requirements. We are, at this point, really trying hard to figure out what are some of the categories of smart cities, as an example, and building templates for these reference architectures. Barcelona, which was one of our first deployments, is very different than what we did with Kansas City, and these are both from quote-unquote developed markets, but their drivers were different, their business models were different, the bodies that took initiative were very different. In Barcelona, it was the city and the mayor. In Kansas City, it was Sprint, which had their headquarters there and had a very strong service provider footprint in the city. So I think that's another kind of dimension to deal with, the fact that the business models, the return on investment is also very different for different cities right now.
Ravi, you're the management consultant. This is the kind of problem you should be able to talk about.
In fact, more than the management hat, I really want to wear the government hat. Because I think the 800-pound gorilla we haven't dealt with is government. You want smart energy, it's a government monopoly. You want smart transportation, Bangalore, it's government monopoly. Anything, waste management. So I really believe that unless we address that, we are really not going to make headway in our smart city program. You'll have a few pilots, few gated stuff that will work. But on scale, it's not going to work. The way I look at smart city, the challenge really is, we have a 1980 motherboard, and we are talking about some 2015 processor being put on that motherboard. It's not going to work. And I think unless we address that collectively, we're going to have a problem. So I really want to make two quick points, set of points. One, the cynical me in terms of what's happening here, and then the other optimistic in terms of what's the way out. Because if we took a look at the cynical part, it's clear that we don't have a traffic solution unless we embrace public transportation on scale. As the BMTC head said, 6,500 vehicles move 50 lakh people in Bangalore every day. And the remaining 50 lakhs are moved in 55 lakh private vehicles. The answer is staring in our face that we really need to embrace public transportation on scale as part of our solution. I mean, Delhi is going for the odd even and stuff like that. But what do we do? If you saw yesterday's paper, we have these mini cab aggregators and maxi cab aggregators, ZipGo, for example, which actually is public transport. Public transport is any vehicle that doesn't belong to me. And they aggregate 15, 16 people and move them around. They give you flexibility on route, on stops, on just about everything. But what does the government do? It quotes an archaic contract, Stage Carriage Act of the horse carriage era to say thou cannot run. So it's not clear. And then you have the minister who says he wants to build underground tunnels as the way forward for Bangalore. He's on record saying that. What is underground tunnel? Promoting more private of mixed mode use. So the point I'm really trying to make is, there is an elephant in the room, which is government. And all the smart people have got to figure out, how do we get the government to do the smart things? There was this recent presentation which says, I've been part of a procedure, government committee, BBMP restructuring. We have built a GIS map, base map, and 104 layers of information. And for the last 3-4 months, I've been trying to peddle that in government. Hello, can somebody host this? Can we share this with citizens and do something? And there's not a single taker as yet. So these are what we are up against. And the government independently says 100 Smart City program. So to my mind, it's something that Ashwin made in the first presentation, where I see the ray of hope. And Cisco and others will have to figure out how to do this. I think the way out is to build a certain set of platform as freeware, shareware, and make that available to government. Put it out there. Some wing of government will accept it more than someone else. And let's get this process started. The ability of government to do a tender and an RFP which people can quote for doesn't exist. It's pathetic. So the way to do, I've been part of tender sure roads, and I know what it took. The reason tender sure roads are happening, and you may have different views on it, but that it is happening is because we went and made it freely available to government. We went and gave the DPR, saying, here's the DPR, now just go and bid it out as the contracting thing. Because otherwise, you're going to get very suboptimal solutions and very bad implementation of pretty suboptimally designed programs in the first place. So my plea to industry, which are in the IoT space, we will kill each other for market share later. Let us first go create a market that happens. And for that, my suggestion really is, figure a way to come out and make that part applicable. The rest can happen.
Joseph, we'll get your perspective.
I want to step back a little bit more from the time the procurement rolls out. If you look at the procurement practices globally and what we have here today, it is an age-old procurement process, which is restricting really extremely good vendors in the market who can come up with a collective thought process to bring in platform and technology solutions to government. Our terms and conditions in the procurement practices need to be revisited. Why I'm saying that, there are niche players, there are extremely capable players in the market, in the global market, which have been completely thrown out because of the restrictive procurement processes and practice available in the country today. For example, if I take a T's and C's statement, if I read and going to sign the T's and C, it is just like I'm going to sign my own death warrant, something like that. So when government delegation travel outside to see what is globally been perceived as smarter city, before that, the delegation have to travel outside and see how procurement collectively done by vendors in the market. How vendors are empowered in a collective deliberation to define the procurement process, that first of all. The second one, we attained independence, 70 years passed, and we are trying to achieve and define it in 1 year period. Everything needs to be agile and to be done in a shorter period of time. We need to define the proper timelines and the proper scope. And that is exactly what is missing sometimes in our procurement processes today. It is just to catch up the speed of the Western world, we are procuring something which is substandard. And the other thing is like, I'm talking about accelerating the smarter city adoption. The other thing is like, multiple vendors in the market coming in silos, talking about solutions, is the government providing a platform. Today, there are 100 cities being identified. The first 20 will be announced soon for the first year of smarter city implementation. And in each state, there are a couple of cities being identified. They are in competition. How can we integrate city on a platform, on a state-owned platform? Can states think of a cloud platform hosted by a vendor, which can be completely managed by a vendor? State need not to hold to the ownership of that platform at all. It can be hosted by business partners in the ground. I can give you one example. Passport processes in the country was the most cumbersome process which we have seen in the past. When we rolled out that RFP, and when TCS took over the business processes from government, PSK, Passport Seva Kendra, became so flexible and so agile and fast. Can government come up with new business models to accelerate the smarter city adoption? Can they give the business process which is held by states today, handed over to business, vendors, and on only the signatory, proprietary cause of the government? That is why that is one area I'm thinking how we can accelerate certain of the processes, business processes which need to be, integrated together with the smarter city adoption.
I want to open up another line of questioning just on this. One is, yes, there are services like Passport Seva Kendra, but those are completely government processes. But the smart city fundamentally is about processes and things where the interface and the interplay between society, the state, and the market is that much greater, right? So we have to imagine those basket of services. And large companies historically have liked the government because the government is not only a potential big buyer, but it's also kind of like a pathway to the citizens and the large universe of potential users of that technology. But what we're seeing around the world is that there are companies that are coming up that are going directly to the consumer, and government is sort of an incidental user of their technology. For example, a lot of our government departments use Gmail, even though they're probably not supposed to, but they use it. But Gmail wasn't built for the government department. It was just built for various individual users and even business users, and governments end up using it. And so the question I want to sort of raise to all of you is, in this evolving space, do we see the conventional ways in which engineering technology companies have played out their role as developing the market? Or do we see the market as being mostly shaped by what consumers want directly from companies that produce consumer-wanted services, and therefore government is just piggybacking on those services? Which of these models do you think will actually emerge in the next few years? Chetan, I'll start with you.
Sure, I think we're going to see a combination of that, because in any of these, unlike a Gmail solution or something else, you control the whole system. But in a lot of these smart city solutions, there are going to be parts that you don't control. And I think that becomes a challenge on this area. But I think if the initiative would be more consumer-driven and more people-driven, then what will happen is those bits and pieces that are missing, we find solutions for them and come together. It's much more likelihood that you'll see a lot more success in the short term around that. And I think it comes back to the open platform that allows us to do it. Certain central services, however, which are very government controlled, will need to come from them. If they can open up APIs to then this system, which allows true value-added solutions to come in, then I think that could be a win-win situation for both sides. So maybe a coexistence of these two solutions with open architectures of APIs, connecting them to increase it. And that could maybe win.
You see that happening?
No, I don't see that happening easily. In fact, the Smart City program, it's a nicely drafted program, but I'm very skeptical even on the first 20 cities, You're going to get 100 crores from central state, so there's actually 1,000 crores available there. I suspect that you're going to have a grab bag mix of projects that happen. Even if you see the Smart City consultants that many people have selected, these are people who are going to write some infrastructure projects and get funding. People who can imagine the city, that kind of skills, who have a voice for citizen participation so that you can discover different destinies, like he said, between Kansas City and Barcelona, doesn't exist. Our city governance architecture between the state, the city, the mayor is not in place. So we have huge challenges. A quick word also on procurement. While I concede the theoretical point that we need to get it right, in practice, for example, Karnataka has something called KTPP, Karnataka Transparency and Procurement Practices Act or whatever. We have processes in government, tendering processes, that for a road project, you will end up hiring a barber, but the guy who selected the barber will not go to jail because you would have followed something called due process. And you multiply that 10 times over, that's the reality of how this place is structured. So to answer your question, Ashwin, really is, there is a theoretical, desirable stuff that we need to get to, but we are working in a very dysfunctional environment. So I keep always saying, and all the language in these kind of sessions are built around elegant systems theory, in an elegant systemic world where different parts have to work. But frankly, we need more principles of game theory. We've got to figure out how to game it to get the outcomes you want. And that's what we are up against. So I come back again saying that if we are smart enough to figure out that this is how it has to happen, I feel we need to go out and give that to government, saying, here, this is what you need to do. And we are happy to give this to you free of charge. And can you run with some parts of it? And hopefully you'll get better outcomes. So, and therefore this whole, in your earlier presentation you had, it's about information to, all that is conceded. But the language of citizen feedback, the language of thing is still not mastered in any which way in our cities. And therefore, I fear for our smart city program. I was part of JNNURM. We had great intent, but we know how JNNURM played out as a grab bag of projects. Same thing is going to happen to smart cities. And finally, we'll meander and maybe some good will come out of it, but not leveraging what can be.
I think you have to, oh yeah, I keep on forgetting. So, we did a survey of municipal executives across hundreds of cities in North America last year. We're doing a similar one in India to get a sense of it. And the top 2-3 things that came up as challenges in getting into the stage of even looking at planning smart cities and then further on deploying them, the number one challenge was funding, just not having enough sources of funding to fund these things. Because we're not talking about an incremental budget increase, we're talking about a significantly different way of doing things. The second one was a lack of understanding of return on investment, which was another interesting one. Most people on the municipal executive level are still struggling with understanding the return on investment, articulating it, quantifying it, etc. So I think what we're seeing is, I agree with Chetan, it'll effectively be a blend of government and the larger players like service providers and operators, people who are involved in procuring installation sites and building things like bus stops, which could become kiosks for delivering information and hubs for wireless networks, etc., will play a major role. They will either have to subsidize or fund these type of models to create the infrastructure, or they will have to figure out monetization models which will enable them to invest in these. Again, taking an example of the Kansas City Sprint got into it because they are using a large part of this infrastructure as an advertising channel. So they're using these kiosks that happen to be hubs for the Wi-Fi and the cellular backhaul of the lighting and parking networks are kiosks where they can use them as advertising channels. So that's just one way how a big service provider and operator will fund something like this. So I think that will remain a big piece. There are services, obviously, where consumers will play a role and will end up driving other private companies to invest. But I see that as a smaller part. In the whole platform discussion we've had so far, we've been talking about it at a software and a platform level, but the infrastructure is a very key piece. And in most greenfield deployments, that happens to be the more significant investment. So at the platform level, we can probably build, give it for free, and hope that they will see the value and come back. But that doesn't really play out in the infrastructure part. If you have to build smart lighting system, video surveillance, parking systems, you have to invest in infrastructure, and that money has to come from somewhere. So.
In fact, Ishwar, you make an interesting point. In Bangalore, we did there's been an earlier study done by the ITBT department that Bangalore conservatively requires 2.5 lakh crores over a 10-year period, which is roughly 25,000 crores per year as the kind of money investment if you want to build a better city. The reality today across all government departments, our capital spends across everybody is less than 5,000 crores per year, where 25,000 is required. And it's reasonably well documented and well known anecdotally that 60-65% of that infrastructure money leaks. So actually you're doing something like a 2,000 crore real spend where you need to be doing 25,000 crore. And the other thing that surprised me about your findings is you didn't find that the capacity of government and people in government to do what is required is abysmally low.
That was the third thing. One. That was the third one.
So funding and capacity, and that's really at the heart of this whole debate.
Understanding of what goes into building smart cities, technology as well as business models and other things,
I reiterate what Mr. Ravichandar and Ishwardutt mentioned. Of course, the key drivers, of course, the consumers, the citizens are driving this initiative crazily because the service delivery expectation of citizens are going extremely high. At the same time, the fiscal austerity driven by multiple governments globally, it is also going very crazily. And there is pilferage within the budgets being allocated. That is one thing which is majorly being hit by the Indian market over here. So how we can develop an environment wherein the conditions of fiscal austerity can be, overcome by bringing in technology on government platforms, by, reducing the revenue leakage, improving the revenue realization. These are all because a city need to sustain. Even if we do have real smart solution, how can we run the city? Because we need to have revenue flowing in. So the pilferage need to be stopped, whether it is water leakage or whether it is the tolling, money which is not being collected properly, whatever ways, the tax collection, the pilferage need to be stopped. So the smartness needs to come from two ways. The service delivery, which is being delivered to the citizens, and how the revenue flowing into the government. And how government can support a very robust and efficient platform to host all these solutions, what we discussed today, to integrate as a single ecosystem. One more thing I want to touch upon. Today, if you look at the procurement process, again, I'm coming to that. In order to smarter city solution to flourish and sustain, we need to have a multi-vendor ecosystem, much robust consortiums to form. Because Internet of Things, it cannot be provided by a single vendor. It is manufacturing, infrastructure capability, service providers, system integrators, proven consortiums have to come across. But today what I'm seeing the challenge is, if somehow an SI is pulling a consortium which is efficient, when they come towards the T's and C's discussion, that consortium will break away. And this is what government have to take care. They need to develop these consortiums, real good vendors who are capable in delivering these solutions and halt to it and create revenue for them. That exactly is the purpose of government, how they can support this initiative.
Yeah, I would look at this funding as the other way around. We saw an earlier example of sensors being used for water, and we say now there's huge investments and tenders for that. What if we turn this around and we told, okay, we will save you X, and we will take 30% of the savings on this area, and we may put 50 times the sensors and run it for them. No investment by them. So I think there's an opportunity to change around the business model. And even instead of companies getting X, they could get probably 3X the revenue by really looking at it. And so it's outcome-based things. If we're really thinking smart cities are supposed to give value, smart cities are supposed to remove inefficiency, well, then we should be able to create new mechanisms to get that. So that could be another way.
Yeah, that might happen even in the private-to-private spaces. We've seen builders and large developers who are more comfortable with saying, I'll pay 45 paisa per square foot per year additionally for you to bring these kinds of efficiencies. And they and it also becomes cost that they incur over a period of time rather than cost that they incur upfront when doing some of these kinds of things. We're out of time here on the panel discussion, but I wanted to leave some time for people in the audience to raise questions if you had any. Anybody wants to ask a question? Yeah, please, sir.
Panelists.
It's okay.
Can one of the enlightened panelists take the case study of Bangalore Metro Rail, and enlighten us where have we gone wrong and why are we in this kind of a situation?
It's a Bangalore Metro Rail problem cannot be described in terms of technology or management or any of those kinds of. It's an administrative problem. Frankly, the basic problem in many of these specialized engineering projects in India is that we really don't have the internal capacity to do it, number one. And second, we rely on an administrative system in which it says a generalist administration officer has to lead this whole thing. He's been Agriculture Secretary and Administrative Reforms Commission Joint Secretary and various other things before. How can he possibly know how to run a metro? This is the thing. First of all, whether Sridharan's done a wonderful job cannot be decided only inside India. The second thing is that it is not to say that you can't have extraordinarily talented people emerge through any system. But whether your system as a whole is capable of routinely producing such people is what you should ask. that is different. I mean, even if you go to some silly college somewhere in the corner of India, it's possible to find that 1 or 2 people have gone to IIT. But that's not the reason to sort of create, entire systems around that. What I would say is, metro is complicated by 2 things. One, it is a city project that is run not by the city at all, but by the state government and by the central government. Nowhere else in the world does the federal government come and tell you that it will run transportation systems in a city. This is the core problem. And this has been something we've been struggling with since Hanumantaya's commission recommended all these reforms in 1963. It's been that way. It's a whole other thing. I don't see that as a technology or managerial problem. It's a governance reform problem itself. But there's also one other thing, which is the cost of money. In India, a lot of projects that cost a lot of money struggle because long-term financing is not straightforward in markets like ours. So Metro, for example, is going to be standing for 120 years at least. But we're trying to get it financed in the first 15 years. I mean, is that really necessary? Couldn't we think of financing models in which, yes, our cities will become progressively smarter over the next 40, 50 years, but really it doesn't have to be today's generation alone that pays for it. Can we think of those kinds of models?
Perfect. So, I mean, just a few other quick points about the metro. From the first time in 2004 when they put the alignment itself, it just dropped from the sky. You wait, let the network come, and when everybody starts just interchanging at Majestic, you'll realize the next set of problems. So it's badly done. We are averaging 3 kilometers per year in the metro construction, which is pathetic by any standards. And some of it has to do with the fact it is a specialized job to pull it off. And you mentioned Sridharan. Sridharan took the most difficult part of the metro in Chandni Chowk and those areas and did that first. What did we do? We went into MG Road and built one ugly metro overground as the first thing out here. So just about everything that you can think of was badly done. And even I'll just give you a quick one on BRT because Outer Ring Road affects many people who live there. The city decides to do a BRT from Hebbal to Silk Board, and they actually build split flyovers everywhere so that the BRT can go in the middle. And suddenly they decide they don't want it. And now the current thinking is, we will build the metro in the Outer Ring Road after 2030. I don't know who's going to be around in the Outer Ring Road at that time for that metro. It's a sign of just about everything that's wrong about the way we plan our place and implement things.
We'll close, but I really want to reiterate the point that Chetan brought up and many others also reiterating. Ultimately, we have to pull together to build this ecosystem in which multiple organizations can thrive, but if we make our business interest itself the primary filter up front, we won't even get to the opportunity together. So as many of you as can collaborate in building the technological possibility of the smart city, I really want to encourage more and more people to do that.
Which should really be co-optation. You got to cooperate out there to create the market, and then you compete later for market share.
Thank you.